Good afternoon, all. Good morning, good evening, where you're joining from, and welcome to this CWI 2022 session, where we are going to be looking at the pathways to water security through governance and knowledge management, looking at the role of knowledge and information in navigating to enable water security. I think we can start with our program. You're all welcome to this session. I think maybe we can start with a few ground rules. In terms of the Q&A, you can look at the site where you joined from the CWI main site, and then you can put your questions there, and then we'll have a look at them, and then we'll take them through on this site. And then in terms of the presentations, we've lined up 4 speakers who are going to take us through some presentations.
I'm sorry, somebody talking because we can't hear.
Yes, I'm trying to speak. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can everybody hear?
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Yes, we
Okay,
can
no,
hear you.
thank you. As I was saying, welcome to the session. As I said, we have got 4 speakers that we've lined up for this session. And then we will start with our presentations once we have introduced them. So I will move over to the introductions where I will introduce our speakers. The first speaker that I would like to introduce is Dr. Espan Nube, who is working for Randwater as the acting general manager for scientific services. She has got over 24 years experience in the water sector. She has a PhD in public health and various other qualifications, including a master's in business leaderships. And then she's also involved in supervising students. The next speaker is Prof. Mbangiseni Nefumbada, who is also a Randwater employee, who is a program manager, special priority projects. And then he's got extensive experience in the water industry, having worked for various sectors within the water sector in South Africa. And then also is involved in a number of organizations, including UNESCO, and then also working with the University of Johannesburg. The next speaker is Viwe Paya, who holds a master's degree in maritime studies from the University of Waterloo University in South Africa, and then who is also pursuing a PhD at the moment. And then our last speaker will be Mr. Alexander Carroll, who is also pursuing a PhD, and then also has a master's degree and is working at the Knowledge and Information Management section in Randwater. And by way of introduction, myself, I'm Obimasia. I'm the acting manager for partnerships and collaboration in Randwater, which is the water utility that supplies bulk water mainly to the Gauteng province out here in South Africa. And then I'm also involved in the Randwater Institute, which is an institute that is looking at innovation, research and development, also knowledge and information management. I think I'm done with the introduction of the speakers and introducing myself. And then I would like us to move over to the actual presentations, starting with Prof. Nefumbada. Prof, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just for the purpose of people, I don't know if I'm visible there or if my presentation is visible. Thank you very much for the introduction. You've noticed that you may have seen that already because my focus is on pathways to water security through governance and knowledge management. We are looking particularly at the role of knowledge and information in terms of navigating water governance to enable water security. What I've done is that I'm focusing on primarily the work that we've been researching on over the past few years as well. And we've generated some interesting concepts regarding how water security could be managed. And my presentation is covering a few issues that, as you can see in the presentation outlined there. I'll probably jump through some of the slides just because I'm assuming that the participants would be familiar with some of the issues that we have raised, particularly within the context of water sector. Just for the purposes of orientation, for those who may not necessarily be familiar with the location that we have, we are located southern tip of the country, and you can see the positioning of our province vis-a-vis the positioning within the context of the continent or African continent. I think it is important to note that we are coming from one of the oldest water boards in the country, and perhaps maybe even on the continent, which is turning 120 years in the next year, which is a very important part of what we look at. And the context that one would look at is, and I think a lot of us are familiar with this, so I'm not going to go into the details of it. If you follow the World Water Development Report program, you will see that this picture was brought up somewhere around 2012, which is around the time that as a country, we started developing a national development plan. And what we then did was to look at it to say, how do we implement looking at the next 2030? But the point here is that within the governance context, I think we are very much familiar with the issues of drivers in terms of what happens in the sector, familiarity with the fact that the system as a whole, most of the decisions are made outside those of us who are in the hydrological space and the space of provision of water resources generally. So I think that is part of the point that one is making with regards to knowledge and information. And obviously the aspects of flow dynamics become key to enable informed decisions across every part of the value chain, so to speak. And obviously the availability, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and the value, the availability in terms of effectiveness within the context of the total value chain. And one of the things that we are saying as well is to say, in actually defining or explaining what water security is about, we need to localize it, meaning it needs to actually reflect the lowest level within the context of spatial scale, temporal scale, and all of that. And the choice here is to say we look at relational description, which assists with in terms of empowering people to be part of the project of actually water resource management and provision of water resources. Some of the issues that probably are well known in respect of the various dimensions, and I've included here, even the way in which we are managing globally, we are aware of the hazards, the extremes, and some of the issues that are linked to that, your climate change, the human well-being, which we'll probably talk a little bit later during this session, issues of production and how that interfaces. And I think some of you who are familiar with some of the issues that we face as we speak with regards to food security and other things, environmental flows, and then the political domain or dimension, which includes your transboundary cooperation and all of that. And I think you will appreciate the fact that as South Africa, probably more than 60% of our water is shared. And most of these are actually embedded in the policy that we have. And the other thing is that we've got serious challenges that relate to what we tend not to get into some detail in respect of changing the life of people through the context of economy and all of that, equality, inequality, water and poverty, and so on. And we are calling to say you need to look at this from the point of view of saying water cycles or planning cycles for water tend to be much longer than the activities of other cycles, particularly within the context of political cycles changes. You will find that there are several changes before you actually complete a particular project or a program even. So we need to look at these things from a systems perspective. And the argument there is that we need to look beyond scarcity and abundance. I think that's very clear in terms of how do we then interface with some of the issues that we have indicated. So the principles, therefore, at the highest level would be some that is very well known, and I'm aware of the fact that the colleagues from Orasecom, for example, participate in these sessions. This is clearly, if you look at their plans, you will find that they are beginning to say source to sea. But if you look at the location of the basin, it's further from the sea and all of that, but the understanding of the water cycle needs to look at that. But the point here which we wanted to make is the issue of nexus frameworks that we have, both at national and regional level. Regional being your agreements that we have in terms of aligning and harmonizing the policies and so on. You will see the OECD here has got certain principles of governance that are looked at, and data information becomes part of that. And I'm not going to go into the rest of it, primarily because some of this we are very much aware. The institutional issues of roles and responsibilities, the issues of ensuring that the engagement that takes place within the context of the various aspects of management or of governance is actually built on trust and engaging of citizens and so on. So those are the key issues that we look at. And as we move, we look at the issues relating to long-term view in terms of scenario planning and associated risk that are attached to that. And I think it's critical to look at the fact that your institutions such as your rainwater, for example, we are able to get some of the information and the data that will allow us to assess this. One of the key issues is the issue that relates to collaboration and approach that we look at. And obviously, this is well known within the country. We look at our policies right from the Bill of Rights, which is very clear in terms of the constitutional issues and the associated policies that we have been implementing over time. Serious challenges, because some of these issues are not easy to implement, but we look at saying you need a transdisciplinary approach that allows the application of knowledge and information within the context of active citizenry, or what people relate as a triple collaboration model, or quadruple if you bring in society, science, policy, and then delivery domain as well. Just to indicate there that the applications and some of the issues we're talking about is about primarily the flow dynamics of knowledge and information as you apply, as well as the value thereof. How much impact does that have? This is very generic. And we look at saying, instead of just looking at specific areas of value, the value then is expanded to include the issues of operational benefits, business processes, and all of that, to say you will need some capability within the context of the value basket, and you begin to address some of the challenges that we have. Now, based on all of those areas that become a challenge, the suggestion here is to say, or the proposal or the presentation says, you've got some thematic areas that we recognize as allowing transdisciplinary management of the resources and provision of provision of services. If you look at the left there, the attempt there is to show that we had, as we started post-apartheid period, we had a paradigm of reconstruction and development, which looked at trying to close the gaps of inequality. Then came the Millennium Development Goals. I think when we measured there, we were quite high at 95% in terms of compliance, but obviously those were basic supplies. And then you go to this current environment in which we are, the paradigm which says sustainable provision, and you find the numbers are actually not looking as good as they used to be, probably by about 25%. I can't remember the exact numbers there. So that's why we are saying perhaps you need to look beyond just the material water provision to begin to start looking at how do you engage communities and everybody else. I think nowadays we call it all hands on the deck, so to speak. I'm not going to go through all of those. This can be made, can be provided, but the key area for today is more on the research, monitoring, assessment, and information, which then supports all of that. And the governance aspect is more on the enabling side. Then the nexus issue you can see, the infrastructure. In the infrastructure, we bring in the ecological infrastructure quite a lot so that we can begin to deal with it. The other area is the area of risks that relate to resilience, preparedness, and responses. Recently, we have witnessed serious challenges that came through either it's COVID or floods or droughts and everything else that we are familiar with. So the cost of actually responding is much higher than when you build your resilience within the context of whatever may be happening in the across the system, so to speak. This is just showing the footprint of typical water utilities, saying you need to look at it right from the individual throughout to the national, international level. And we cannot run away from the fact that your connection is actually through socioeconomic issues and more than just water itself. So we need to address some of those issues there. I will skip that because it's just demonstrating a similar situation to show. I think these are old numbers, but the new numbers can actually show you that we're really talking about some very interesting numbers that need to be serviced. This is just an illustration. We plan on the basis of systems in terms of supply, but we need to protect the resources and so on. And I think my colleagues will also talk to this a little bit later. This is the same, the issue of monitoring framework that requires a lot of information and data, and which we can then say, look, we need to be looking at in terms of the elements of matrix that we have, how much is available. We are familiar with that, but you do need to look at the various sources. For example, one of the things that we have introduced or we are trying to argue out is to say, of the alternative sources, you should have virtual water as a category that would allow us to manage the economic accounting and other things that relate to that. This is probably the last slide or second last. Often it's very easy to put 17 SDGs and then you leave it like that. But when you start drilling a little bit deeper, you start realizing that SDG 6 itself is supposed to be somewhat nexus so that it allows some of those issues to be dealt with. For most of us, the three key areas of poverty, unemployment, and inequality are the things that we've got to deal with. And I've just selected some of the SDGs that are relevant for that to create a narrative that says, what exactly are we doing with respect to making a difference? And the argument is that knowledge and information enables the decisions and assessment of water security as such, and it becomes much easier for us to deal with that. And there are a lot of information globally, maybe nationally, we also have quite a lot of data and information that can actually be used before we even go too far, besides the collection of what we have and with the capability that we have in terms of issues such as your big data and so on. I think this is the last one, and thank you very much. I will take questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for that presentation. Very insightful. And then we will be looking forward to taking the other presentations. Mr. Vuepaya, I'm not sure if you are ready, and then you can start loading your presentation.
Okay, now I'll just share now. So, Obi, do I share it from my side or you will share it there on that side?
You can share it from your side. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm not sure if I'm audible enough and if my slides are visible.
Yes, you are audible and the slides are visible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Coming from a water sector, coming from a water sector domain and within Randwater to be specific, and I've came across a lot of challenges that has got to do with water, water supply, availability of water in terms of regulation in the district municipalities and other local municipalities, especially where I come from. And I think it is critical that from a water sector domain that we solve these problems in any of the way that we can. Could be in terms of the partnerships, in terms of partnering with other organizations and entities, could be in terms of research and development. We could use any other tools that we have to solve these problems. And there's also that planning system in terms of the national spatial planning in South Africa. It had to be developed in the context of the Bill of the Rights. However, it is not clear whether it was developed in the same spirit of the national constitution and the realization of its objectives. I think those are some of the critical issues that we need to look at across the governance skills. Having said that, and I'm not sure why is my slide not moving. Mr. Obi, can I assist?
Yes, your slides are not moving. Can you maybe take it down and then reshare?
Okay. Okay, there we go. South Africa is a water scarce country. This is what you always say every day. This assertion is principally based on the physical descriptors such as climatic conditions, increase in the population, increase in the demand of water. The South African Constitution declares water as the right to the human, to everyone. However, there's still a number of areas in South Africa which still remain disconnected from the water services being provided by the municipalities. And this lack of access to these services has left those areas in poverty due to issues linked to inequality. As the World Bank report says, that South Africa is one of the countries with the highest inequality. And the inequality in the country, it can be linked to two aspects. There's colonialism, apartheid, spatial planning. Because before 1994, during the apartheid, spatial planning in South Africa was simply used to motivate apartheid ideologies. Hence, we now have the national spatial development frameworks, amongst other things, which seeks to suppress the historical inequalities. However, with those frameworks and strategies in place, we still have a number of areas that are still subjected to this kind of inequalities. For example, to be specific, in the Eastern Cape, we have quite a number of district municipalities, about 6 of them, who are still affected by inequality, which is largely aggravated by drought impacts that commenced since 2015. It's been 6, if not 5 years, if I'm not mistaken now. And it's still the case even now. And having spoken about the two issues above, the issue of apartheid, spatial planning, and the issue of colonialism. The South African population in urban centers is estimated to be around 65% and is still increasing, which makes it much more even difficult in terms of planning for water security to counteract the historical inequalities. In South Africa, we have 3 main cities that usually experience high population density due to resources, people running for resources. On your right, you could see this map, the one with the keys on your far right. This we have at the center the Gauteng, at the bottom we have bottom right we have a Tekwini, which sometimes referred to as Durban, and then we have Cape Town. And then looking at this, it is therefore, you can see that it is important that in terms of the national spatial planning framework, it is important that water security forms part of the integral part in terms of the national planning, because water is a nexus. It means it connects a lot of different things that create opportunities, so that now we can have resources even distributed in the places. And then the map on the left, it simply shows the spatial planning during the apartheid in South Africa. Because if you can look at on the right hand side, you can see that in terms of the resource distribution, people tend to go to certain places in terms of to look for resources and at opportunities and all that. And then modified human development index. Having mentioned, sorry about that. Having mentioned that we have a number of district municipalities in the Eastern Cape which are largely affected, which are affected by inequality and drought impacts and all other things. There is a project that efforts are being made at the moment to undertake a project in all 5 of these district municipalities to ensure that we reduce inequality. We look at the issues such as water access and the availability of water using a modified human development index. Modified human development index is a tool or an indicator that is simply an extension of a traditional human development index, which was developed by United Nations Development Program around 1990s. This tool is simply used to track the development between the countries with respect to 3 dimensions, which is health, which is education and income. However, due to widely varying magnitude of development between the countries, efforts were made to improve the traditional human development index through adding some indicators such as employment, dimensions, such as the employment, democracy, infant survival, and other indicators. The modification of this traditional human development indicator has made it possible to use at a local level to assess the level of inequality, just like it's going to be used for this project. And so going forward, the water infrastructure development, the water infrastructure development is a key in terms of attaining sustainable economic development, the human well-being, and the other socioeconomic development aspects. A reliable supply of safe, clean, and sufficient water to households is a fundamental requirement for healthy lifestyle. A lack of access or even access to pure water can cause problems for the societies, such as the drags on growth. As I've mentioned, that water is a nexus between different aspects. It can create opportunities, and the other problems could be spread of diseases in the societies, which can lead to infant mortalities. The National Water Security Framework, therefore, recommends a holistic approach to plan and monitor the contribution of water to communities through the use of modified human development index. This project, therefore, will use this modified human development index with a specific focus on relevant and specific indicators, for example, which are life expectancy, level of education, and GDP per capita. And furthermore, this modified human development index, it recognizes the importance of infant survival as an indicator of sanitation and the other water facilities due to susceptibility of infants to waterborne diseases. It will therefore be necessary to include that indicator in terms of in this project to assess in terms of availability of sanitation and other water facilities, and also other indicators and dimensions that are included in the modifier that could also assist in the project will be environmental welfare dimension, which comes along with water supply or water access indicator, which is one of the indicators that will also be used in the project. And then lastly, the results of the project will then be used and benchmarks against the well improved municipalities to see the problems where are they, and then inform the policymakers and reduce inequality, which is one of the main focus. And of course, coming from the Water Board and under a function called Knowledge and Information Management, we'll also make sure that we use the results of the project within the Water Board to ensure that we buffer the footprint of Randwater to ensure that it doesn't get exposed to similar problem, the likes of the drought and other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paya, for the presentation and then for highlighting important issues such as water scarcity and the issues of inequality, because I think those issues are critical, and looking at knowledge, information, and innovation, we can be able to find ways, to address this and to understand better our industry so that we're able to adapt quickly instead of us waiting for things to happen and then we react. Some of the things I think the Prof has highlighted regarding situations like COVID-19 that we didn't foresee or we didn't plan for. So it means that we need to improve our knowledge base and also our innovation and technology so that we can be able to move forward. I think with that, we can move on to the next presentation. That will be by Ms. Alexandra Carroll.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, you can just go to presentation mode. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra, and I'm going to be speaking about the political ecology of water using Randwater as a case study. Nobody would disagree that water is a highly significant element to almost any economic activity and human life in general. Water is one of the key ingredients to any development plan of a country or territory. This means that how we use water, for what and by whom, as well as pricing mechanisms and a host of other questions, are all issues that must be extensively and robustly debated by as many stakeholders and at as many levels as feasibly possible. This is because how people in positions with an ability to bring water policy and legislation to fruition or halt implementation answer these questions has ramifications for us all. Universities with Western ideological leanings teach a concept called scarcity in just about any introductory economics class. The argument goes that there's simply not enough to go around to satisfy all our desires to the fullest. This then justifies a second key concept in Western economics, productivity. To be most productive, economics tries to utilize land, labor capital, and natural resources in the most efficient way. The reasoning here is that because there's not enough to go around, trade-offs need to be made in allocating how much of each resource is used for competing uses to maximize efficiency. An opposing framework that some non-Western and indigenous people have is that scarcity is often artificially manufactured or the result of a particular set of conceptual constructs rather than an absolute truth. The notion of scarcity being artificial makes a lot of sense when we take a look at the ways that colonialism and apartheid have operated in South Africa. Colonialism has a long history of removing and displacing people and then forcing them to live on overcrowded pieces of agriculturally undesirable land. Malnutrition and starvation were rife because the carrying capacity of the land had been exceeded. There was simply no way for the people who lived there to grow enough crops to feed themselves on this land. This was not a mistake by the governments of the time. It was by design. The system was designed to prevent Black African people from sustaining themselves independently and to coerce them to work for little to no pay. Large sections of land were reserved for colonialists' ideas of conservation. This is ironic because there's extensive evidence that Indigenous people safeguard the vast majority of biodiversity through their everyday interactions with nature, rather than fencing off areas to protect it as Western countries do. There is no other reason that so many people went without food and water besides control and monetary gain sought by the imperial powers. To this day, land degradation, including extensive soil erosion, is still prominent in the former Bantustans because of past and sometimes ongoing unsustainable farming practices that are largely influenced by sociological and political issues. From this, we can see that politics, the environment, and economics are deeply intertwined. When we critique the idea of scarcity, we are not making an argument that we live in some sort of utopia with so much available that no one ever has to be deprived of any desire they have. Instead, we would like to take a critical eye when it comes to looking at how resources are allocated and for what purpose. Colonialism and apartheid have created a situation wherein much of the infrastructure networks that exist today were never intended for the benefit of the Black majority. The infrastructure built during the last 400 years, including roads, ports, water, and electricity networks, were all part of a network that was explicitly intended for extracting and transporting natural resources out of the African continent to be used for the benefit of the West. Because of this, infrastructure networks are incredibly inefficient from the perspective of their ability to provide services to rural, Black, and poor people in Africa, although they are frequently expected to do so today. We can see this issue play out at Rand Water. Rand Water is mandated to supply bulk potable water to municipalities, which then supply drinking water to 11 million people, as well as a few companies of national strategic interest, including Eskom, the country's energy utility. However, Rand Water was established in 1903 to supply mining companies with water. The economic models and infrastructure networks were thus based around the mining industry, which exported gold, platinum, and other minerals. Initially, Rand Water's main revenue was from mining, but today that represents only about 10% of the company's total revenue. The mining industry was unimaginably profitable to the government and the Rand lords at the time due to their ability to exploit Black laborers. There was thus plenty of revenue to be used to build infrastructure to support the mining activities of the time. Today, however, with a new mandate and a largely poor and unemployed population, the funding required to reconfigure the water infrastructure remains a serious and unresolved question. In the long term, new water infrastructure and water transfer systems are needed, not simply maintenance and upkeep of the existing infrastructure. There are many ideas around about how South Africa should resolve its water security issues, but as of yet, a lot remains uncertain. Given the fact that the world is now in the early stages of attempting to control the effects of climate change, one idea could be to fund water infrastructure from profits derived from exporting minerals that are likely to become increasingly sought after for their utility in renewable energy generation, including rare earth minerals. However, extensive measures should be taken to ensure that atrocities of the past are not repeated when it comes to extracting minerals from the ground. Extensive research on economic systems would be imperative here. Rand Water conceptualizes water security in terms of a concept known as security of supply. This means that Rand Water is concerned with making sure that there are enough dams and reservoirs with enough water inside them at any given time to meet the demands of their customers. Here, water insecurity is seen as a result of too much demand. In 2005, 95% of national water resources had been allocated, and it is estimated that by 2030, South Africa will be in a supply-demand deficit of 17%, which means that more water will be allocated than there is physically water available in the national reservoirs. From this point of view, some people in the water policy space argue that South Africa should prioritize economic activities that require relatively smaller water inputs relative to the economic value they create, such as mining, over economic activities that have large water inputs, such as agriculture. The aim here would be to squeeze out the most economic value from the available water resources to maximize gross domestic product, or GDP. On face value, this might seem to make some sense, as agriculture uses 62% of the country's available water resources, but contributes only 2.5% to the country's GDP. However, this idea has many criticisms. My criticism would be that this plan is putting the cart before the horse. We need to remember that money is simply a tool for getting things done, and maximizing GDP should not be an end in and of itself. We must first look at this type of society we would like to create, and then build the tools around creating that society and use money and infrastructure to create a good life for everybody. As natural scientists, when we look at South Africa, it's not difficult to see how this is entirely possible with a little bit of imagination, ingenuity, conflict resolution, and coordination. A phrase that has almost become cliche in South Africa is South Africa is among the 30 driest countries in the world. However, as environmentalists with sociological and political leanings, we would rather say that the problems we see in South Africa relating to water are not in fact caused by the physical presence or absence of water in itself. Rather, the absence of water is a manifestation of a problem. We can no longer view the haves and the have-nots as disconnected from one another. It's not a coincidence that some people have access to water, not just for domestic use, but water for economic activities, such as growing crops for creating a profit and export, while many others do not have adequate access. In fact, some people do not have access to enough safe water precisely because some people are not sharing the water that they have access to with others. How we address this is difficult because it involves changing people's mindsets in a host of ways that I'm interested in delving into in my research. I'm particularly interested in understanding why Johannesburg has worsening water pollution and environmental degradation, despite having some of the best environmental legislation in the world. Some concluding remarks are that ring fencing water and infrastructure systems are probably not going to be a solution to South Africa's water security issues. As detailed in South Africa's National Water Security Framework, water should be viewed in terms of a basket of values, not simply its economic or market value, as this will lead to a situation where people who are currently wealthy will end up making all the decisions regarding how water is managed and used and for what purpose. We need to avoid this. Water is a public good and should not be privatized for this reason. Water is very much a shared commodity in its nature. Without cohesive and enforced rules regarding how water is managed, we will continue to see the myriad of issues related to water that we are currently seeing. Transdisciplinary approaches will be more useful in addressing the types of issues that we see. Putting a price on water is not enough to resolve Johannesburg's water security issues. Irrelevant of the economic mechanisms, we must never lose sight of the fact that absolutely everyone in society deserves enough water, not only to survive, but to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carol, for the presentation. Dr. Nube had some technical challenges earlier. I'm not sure if she sorted out and if she has managed to join us. I think we can take a presentation if she's available. Dr. Nube.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Nube. We can move on to presentation mode.
Yes, I'll be with you just now. Thank you, colleagues. It might be afternoon for others and morning for others. I think I thank the glitches because my colleagues that have presented before me, they have laid the background. I don't want, I won't be repeating some of the aspects. Mine is just to look at the catchment management challenges in the Vaal catchment and extended supply areas of Rand water in South Africa. I will strictly attend to those challenges. Just in introduction to indicate that the Vaal River catchment area stretches from Ermelo in the northeast to Vryburg in the northwest to Douglas in the southwest and Harrismith in the east. If you've got a map of South Africa, you'll be able to see those areas. I'll be showing you the pictorial picture. That catchment area covers approximately 197,000 square kilometers and is situated in the geographic center of the country. And of that area, Rand Water only manages at the moment the Upper Vaal water management area. This is the diagrammatical representation of the Vaal River catchment and the areas that are relevant to Rand Water, as you can see in this slide. And as you know, Rand Water mainly abstracts from the Vaal Dam, but the water is received from a number of transfer schemes, which is a network of dams, and the water is pumped from each dam in this order, as you can see in this slide. And also to clarify that we do not abstract from the Vaal River directly at the moment. We only abstract from the Vaal Dam, and we must say that we are privileged because this water is at the moment of good quality because of the pristine water that we receive from the Lesotho Highlands water project. Unfortunately, there are points that we need to note for all these arrangements. The Department of Water and Sanitation is responsible for the Mikli and Lower Vaal water management areas. Initially, there were 19 catchment management areas anticipated based on the 19 main water management areas of the country. On the 26th of March, 2021, the government gazetted the combining of the Vaal and the Orange River water management areas into one, effectively reducing the total number of CMAs from 9 to 6. And currently, there is no CMA in place to that. And one must also note that the integrated Vaal River system is highly developed. Responding to this gazetted initiative, we've indicated also as an organization in that venture, given our experience and knowledge in managing water at catchment level. And basically, I want to give you a feel of what happens at South African catchments, and at country level, what type of challenges we have. That doesn't affect one catchment, but most of them. The first being salinity, and for other one being radioactivity, main metals coming from the mining activities and industrial activities in the catchment, and also excessive sediments, agricultural activities, because our catchments mainly you find that there's a lot of farming activities. The farming activities introduce mainly a lot of pesticides, some of which have been declared emerging contaminants in form of the persistent organic pollutants and are being governed through certain treaties. That is the concern. And also one of the activities in this system in particular is the challenge coming from the malfunctioning of wastewater treatment plants. And if you know very well, most wastewater treatment plants, I can say at a bigger scale in the world, were mainly designed to remove nutrients. And you find that they are based mainly on biological removal of nutrients. And that leaves the challenge of contaminants of such as highly hazardous pharmaceuticals, highly persistent and hazardous pesticides, and these chemicals coming from all industries. You can name it the clothing industries, the leather industries, animal husbandry, etc. And you find that this set of contaminants that are released into the catchment need special technologies to remove. And also we've got atmospheric chemicals and groundwater contamination coming mainly from nitrates and fluoride and other contaminants. And as you know, we've got a lot of challenge coming from the acids mine drainage, which is also is one of the potential to impact on our groundwater. And we looking forward that going forward, this is one of the main contaminants of concern. Nitrates, by now, you know very well, we are challenged by the use of pit latrines, and that can be one of the contributors to groundwater contamination. Not forgetting also the contribution of fertilizers from agricultural activities resulting into that. And the major concern, especially at catchment level, will be the proliferation of eutrophication, which results in algal species that release toxins into this water that we're interested in. And also, I've already alluded to the fact of urban industrial effluent, which is one also that is adding to a lot of challenges when it comes to water quality in our catchments. If you look at from a microbiological point of view, if we look at E. coli, you will find that that is one of the stressors also in the catchment. And to that, I can add, you heard me talk about malfunctioning of wastewater treatment plants. If we look at in the integrated Vaal River system, we are picking a lot of crypto and giardia occurring in the systems, which again calls for different investment into infrastructure. I will allude to those when I start explaining what I mean, the challenges for infrastructure coming from a catchment perspective. You can see from this slide, some of these challenges. Chlorophyll A, I've already alluded, because if we are having this proliferation of eutrophication and increased nutrients at catchment level, these chlorophyll A are an indicator that there are photosynthetic cyanobacteria in the catchment, and you can see the occurrence in the area. Recently, we did some study in the area, in the system, and even the proposed area that we see ourselves being engaged in. We found that the Vaal River system might be developed, it is highly developed in terms of dams, canals, and transfer schemes. I show you the slide. The economy of the whole country depends on the Vaal River system, and its effect that we've found out. the water quality in the system is severely impacted by human activities and deteriorating continuously. I've indicated in the slides, I've already mentioned the issue of wastewater effluent and mine water drainage responsible for high salinity, microbial pollution, and eutrophication levels in the river. And also, while we are seeing all these contamination levels, we are worried, are we going to be able to adjust to climate change and its variability? And I think my colleagues have already indicated in terms of climate change and water security, and which is likely to complicate the management of resources in time, as predictions indicate that extreme events, flood and droughts will become more frequent and also more severe. We also found out that Rand Water has extensive knowledge and data records for the Upper Vaal area and plays an active leading role in the various catchment management forums. Importing water from Lesotho, which I indicated at the beginning, is expensive, and such water should be protected and utilized in a way that will provide a return on the investment. And as Rand Water were very active in the catchment, we even conduct water quality monitoring programs at catchment level. We also have like a control of hyacinths in the rivers to make sure that we protect our source, and also early warning systems that tell us that some parameters are getting out of their expected levels. And we even use some internal managed specifications to make sure that it gives us an indication of how we should, which treatment regime we should engage, especially when the water is coming in into our plants. And one thing that we need to note is the water coming from Lesotho is mainly of low alkalinity, and we through the experience have learned that what to engage, what treatment regime to engage in order to be able to produce water of acceptable quality. And one thing that we've observed is pollution prevention is cheaper than the development of new transfer schemes, and we are proactive in that. The efficient implementation of water resource management is therefore crucial. One challenge that we have is lack of legal enforcement and control, and we observe that are the main reasons for the deterioration. For example, the water use licensing program is not implemented rigorously. Compliance monitoring is lacking. There are no formal water quality guidelines against compliance monitoring that can be implemented. And the polluter pays principle as presented in the National Environmental Management Act is not adequately enforced. And at the moment, there's no formal CMA that exists for this particular water management area. And if this was my last slide, but now I want to take you, if you have listened to me carefully, if you see all these challenges, you can agree with me that going forward, we cannot consider only the conventional treatment process as all these contaminants and all these activities that provide stress to the catchment area tell you that the conventional treatment process might be a challenge going forward. Hence, we are to look at advanced treatment methods to engage in our treatment processes so that we can remove all these contaminants. And all that comes with cost, which means that our infrastructure budgets will have to be relooked at when we want to extend this catchment area and increase on the scope of our activities. That said, I can stop there If there are any questions, I can attend to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nube, for that presentation. And then can okay. Can we all please mute? Okay, no, thank you for muting. That was our last presentation, and then now we're going to move into the Q&A. In terms of the procedure for this session, as I indicated, that the questions are supposed to be posted on the web, and then we'll pick them up from there. However, I've seen that there are a few questions on the chat. I will have a look at those, and then we can start looking at that. I will just ask that the presenters be ready to take some of these questions. The first question is like this. Can you please give insight on decarbonization pathways of the water industry? Prof, are you able to take that one?
I think I'll leave that to Alex to take with on the basis of some of the discussions we had. Thank you.
Okay, it's fine. Alex, you can come through. There's also another one to say, do you follow the decarbonization pathway, which is the same? And then there's the last question. So I think maybe we can take that first question or the first two questions. Thank you. Alex?
If I understand the question correctly, I think a climate change, if that's what they're referring to, and Rand Water, quite an interesting example, because they're quite unique. In Johannesburg is very unique in that it's very far from a major water source, like most major cities in the world. So water has to be pumped using electricity to the city. And that's quite energy intensive. So I think in the long term, there are plans to try decarbonize that very energy intensive process. For many reasons. One, that obviously it's not good for climate change, and I think those are some goals that are set nationally, but also it's incredibly expensive. So I think Rand Water is looking for ways to have less energy intensive water transfer systems, because to cut those major energy costs. But yeah, I think I'm not sure if that answers the question, if that's what they were looking for, but I think that's a little bit of background, if that helps.
Okay, no, thank you, Alex. I think I can add to that. Currently, in Rand Water, we do have a few projects where we are looking at hydro power. We are looking at generating power within our own supply systems, and then also looking at the issue of solar PV. We have got some projects that are lined up, but then eventually in the long term, we are planning to decarbonize, as the question was asking. So there are projects that are running. It's just that due to the nature of our operation and the energy intensive operation, it might take us some time, but then we have already started working on it. And then what I know is that in some countries already, water utilities are expected to generate their own electricity. They are expected to be off the grid. So it might happen in South Africa that the government decide to move in that way. However, we believe that we are working on it. We just need to make sure that maybe we fast track some of our projects. And then the next question or a comment is that the contaminants are such a threat. This refers mainly to Dr. Nube's presentation. In Uganda, a catchment-based management is used to ensure potential polluters are made part of the catchment management committee so that they participate in adopting mitigation measures. Any comments, Dr. Nube, on that one?
Yes, I think thank you for that comment. I've already indicated that it's well received, but it's not that we are not engaging them. We've got what we call catchment forums, where we are part of, and all in the most stakeholders are included. That is users as well as municipalities and the national department. Here we discuss a lot of aspects, and water quality reports are even discussed at this forum. They are aware of it.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nube, for that response or comment. Obviously, with the establishment of the CMAs in South Africa, we will be able to move forward with regards of monitoring and active management of water quality. Obviously, the issue of the wastewater treatment plants, that has to be looked at. Government is looking at that. And then the water boards can maybe in future participate and make sure that we arrest the problems before they happen by making sure that we start recycling or reclaiming the wastewater. I've got two of my co-hosts here that I did not introduce when we started, Zinat and Douglas. Zinat, I'm not sure on the web if there are any questions that we need to look at.
Hi, Obi. Not that I can see.
Okay, there are no questions on the web. I think we have dealt with the questions that we had here. However, we still have some time, and then I think maybe I can pose some of the questions. Prof, looking at the issue of knowledge and information management, obviously linked to innovation, how well do you think we are doing in South Africa or in the water industry? Do you think that we are on track to be able to resolve some of the challenges regarding water scarcity, inequality, water quality, and all the other challenges that we have spoken about?
Hey, thank you very much, Obi. I think the safest answer to that for me, if I look at the landscape, is that we are poised, meaning that we need to improve quite a lot. But one of the things that we have noted is that there is quite a multiplicity of activities that need to take into account or take advantage of the technological advancements that we have had. I think one of the reasons why we are looking obviously at sort of research, knowledge and innovation within Rainwater is to ensure that we can also use the capability that we have to be able to actually play a role within the context of the sector. I think it is very critical. For those of us who work even at a transboundary level, and I think I've noted here that there may be colleagues who come from other parts of the world, other parts of the continent and so on, you will find that often on the value chain, and I speak here from the utility perspective, the utilities don't get to be too much involved. And yet quite a lot of activities happen in that space where the research, the knowledge and all of that can actually be utilized. Perhaps I can share here now that, and I think Dr. Ncube could have mentioned that, but she was more focusing on the environment. As you would know, Rand Water has got programs that have been going on for quite a while, including your supporting universities in terms of research chairs and all of that. So there's quite a lot of requisite capacity that could be utilized across the value chain to begin to look at some of these things. And if you look at the earlier presentations, often as hydrologists and engineers, scientists, and so on, we tend to shy away from dealing with the softer aspects of the science. So those are some of the areas that we need to start venturing in to ensure that the data and information we have is appropriately utilized. I don't know if that covers you, Obi, on the question.
Thank you, Prof. That covers me. And then Dr. Ncube.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to indicate that while there are challenges that we are raising, especially those that are posed by the wastewater treatment plants, jointly with the National Department and Water Research Commission and other global organizations, we are busy with key identified projects where we're looking at the development of guidelines and also the relook at the effluent standards so that monitoring can also improve. We are aware of some of the projects that have been completed, and we know which pollutants and which where are the hotspots in the country and how we can manage them. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you, Dr. Ncube. I think the next question, I'm not sure between you and Prof who can take it. Looking at the SDGs and then how far we are as the water industry in addressing those, and then making sure that we link it up with the rest of the SDGs. And then also referring to Viwe's point that the issue of inequality and issue of poverty in South Africa, how can we make sure that we accelerate and then get out of this situation?
Viwe, do you want to start so we can come in there maybe?
You can start, Prof. You can start.
Thank you very much. I think the aspects of sustainable development goals is so important. I think I presented a slide there that shows that there are two levels. The first one is the way in which we are measuring the impact or the implication, which talks to the tools that we use, that those need to be improved. I think that's a very important point in terms of how do you approach that. The second issue is the issue of, if you look very carefully, the crafting of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in the work that we have done over the past years within the context of trying to close the inequality gaps, particularly in terms of water services provision. The period where we were looking at reducing what I think the numbers were like 40-something% in terms of access to water. If you look at that period, we actually managed to get into about 95% or something like that. And you would find that it was very difficult for us to get to 100 to, more than 95%. I think it was 94.5, 95 and so on. As soon as the SDGs were developed, because of the nature of the requirements that are linked to sustainability, the numbers started indicating that we have less. If you look at statistics or Statistics SA, it will show you South Africa, it will show you that the numbers seem to have shrunk, when in actual fact, it also depends on what you're measuring. Because our basic services, I think you probably people will be aware of the idea of free basic services, both in terms of sanitation and water services and so on, which becomes very critical in terms of the management. Currently, we've gone into universal access, and I think it was around 2012 and so on when we did the NDP and so on. So there is quite a lot of work that needs to be done to address some of the requirements that we have, and maybe even revisiting some of the ideas of saying, what can you do within the ecological infrastructure, within the issues of water conservation and demand management? As you are aware, most of the area that we are occupying, for example, as rainwater supply, the per capita usage of water is quite high, besides the leakages and other things that are related to the systems that we run. But the reality is that we have to reduce the demand side. We've got to reduce the amount of water that is brought in. And if that happens, it will take us further down the road in terms of providing the services that are required. The same applies to dealing with the environmental implications in terms of the earlier question of how do you manage the systems as you have them, and how do you manage going into the future in respect of the demands that we have. I think one of the areas that one can state here is that even though we are able to supply, and I think some of colleagues say we are able to supply 24/7 without a problem. But the reality is that when you get out of the city regions in the rural provinces, as you would know, rainwater being given more responsibilities to run the areas that may be, rural in nature and so on, things become quite complicated or very difficult in terms of dealing with some of these issues. So the question is, are we going to achieve? Yes, we will make inroads, but we've got to act pretty fast, including ensuring that the catchment management institutions are actually finalized or created as quickly as possible. I don't know if that covers you, and maybe Dr. Ncube can come in, or the other colleagues. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Prof. The question, I believe, has been answered. I'm looking at the time. We're left with about 2 minutes, and I think we must move towards closure. And in conclusion, or as a way forward, I think that the water industry, especially in South Africa, we have come a long way. When you look at rainwater's history, when it started in 1903 or those years and up until now, where the issue of water quality is also very important, because in the early days, probably because the mines were using the water for industrial purposes, it was not a major issue. But then most of those mines have also closed, leaving us with an issue of acid mine drainage. I know we didn't talk about that much, but then it's one of the issues that we are currently dealing with in South Africa. And then also looking at the issue of the special planning. The special planning also informs what happens to the infrastructure that we build around that. So how we locate our towns, how we locate our industries, and the resulting impacts and so on. So we obviously need to do a lot in terms of research and development, innovation, knowledge and information management, so that we can be able to move forward. However, there are advances in technology and technology available in the industry currently. It's a matter of making sure that we use the right technology for the right problems, and then also resolving those. And then also looking at the issue of water allocations and equality, and then making sure that we are able to deal with those. And then we're able to make sure that our communities out there, whether they are rural or they're in the cities, they are able to receive water. I see in terms of time, we are almost at the end. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for coming through, everyone that participated in this meeting, and then also for your questions, and then for taking your time to listen to us, even though in our South African time, we are late in the afternoon. almost evening. We appreciate your effort to come through and listen to the session. Hopefully we'll meet again in the future and also during the whole SIWI World Water Week. And then I would also like to thank the presenters, Prof. Dr. Nube, Alex and Viwe, for giving us good presentations and giving us insights in terms of their thinking and what needs to happen going forward. And then I would also like to thank my co-hosts, Zinat and Douglas, for making sure that this webinar happens, because they're working in the background. You might not see them, but they are doing quite a good work. They made this thing possible for us. We had some connectivity problems, but we're able to carry through. Thank you, everyone. We can adjourn the session. I wish you well. Good luck with the other session. Thank you.